I do feel that the whole situation set me back significantly. I ended up marrying and divorcing someone who's just like my father, and I'm still recovering from the abuse I suffered. I've learned more disturbing things about my father since all this went down, and I'm at peace knowing he has no access to me. He's a disgusting monster. My sister has also no contact. Only she hears about it through the grapevine. He's still the same calamity person, whining that his daughters won't talk to him. We get a good laugh at it. Story 23. When I was just a young girl of about 13, I moved to a different state. It was devastating to part with my best friend. We were both outcasts in school. We talked all the time. My wonderful parents must have paid so many long-distance fees after me. Now that I think of it. About a month after I moved, she told me about how she had been talking to someone online chat. I'm excited about it. That it was a high school guy who liked her. She was married to him. They had met. It was so cool. She told me that he had done prison time, that he had his own car and would pick her up from the mall next to him, that they were planning to go to his house, that he had talked about doing inappropriate things with her. I was horrified. We were just kids. I talked to her all the time about how concerned I was, about how she shouldn't do it. Their date kept getting delayed for one reason or another, and it was this whole drawn-out thing. I finally broke down one day and told my parents that they needed to call the police for my friend, and that I was worried she was in danger. My parents called the police, and I don't know if they called the authorities or not. I just know it was a fiasco. My friend or her family. It turned out that it was all a lie. My friend didn't have access to me. Why did she? Apparently my friend was worried she wasn't interested enough, and that I would stop
Come
talking
on,
to
bro.
her. She made this crazy story, so that I would keep talking to her. I was heartbroken that she would intentionally lie so much. I spent hours sobbing and hoping, begging her not to do these things. I never spoke to her. Out of all the betrayals in my life, it was the worst, because it was just the saddest that her actions resulted in the things she was desperate, crazy, and trying to do. We were just kids, and I think the ability to look back on this as an adult just makes it even sadder to me. Story 24. In 1972, when I was 10, I was in a traffic accident. There was a lawsuit, and a large sum was put into a trust fund. At age 18, I attempted to access the money, but my mom kept spinning all these lies trying to prevent me from getting to the account. For example, she claimed that to access the account, I needed a document that was in the safety deposit box, free at the bank because the account had a lot of money. But unfortunately, the key was lost. I went to the bank, and they explained that I need to pay to have a locksmith open the safety deposit box, which I did. It was cheap. The box turned out to be empty. I asked the bank how to access the account, and they explained all it would take was to go to the courthouse and petition to gain control over the account. So I let my mom know about that. She basically lost her mind trying to stop me no matter what, with drama and threats. This led up to the day I went to the courthouse, and in the hallway she was there waiting for me, having a hysterical crying tantrum. And finally, the truth spilled out. All this drama was because she managed to drain the account down from the initial $30,000, and now there was about $1,000. The savings account interest was significantly more than today, and the money would have increased greatly had she just left it alone. The reason she was so hysterical turned out to be not only because the money was more or less gone. Each time she made a withdrawal, she'd also have to go to the courthouse and petition. A clerk in one department would create the document, and then my mom would have to go to the judge and get her agreement and signature on that document. After several visits to the courts, the judges realized she was lying and refused to go along and wouldn't sign the document. So then my mother got the idea that she could just forge the judge's signature, which she did on numerous occasions. Eventually she got caught, and the whole file was somehow made restricted. That's my mom's attempt to keep me from finding out about that. Story 25. Toward the end of my marriage, my ex-husband had a midlife crisis and went off the rails. He honestly went crazy. I found out about a lot of betrayals after the fact, but probably the worst was finding out that while he was staying at the house during the divorce, while I was securing the financing and paperwork to finish putting the house and the mortgage in my name, he had rented an apartment of his own. He'd had it for months behind my back and was continuing to live in the house, making my life miserable, and hadn't told me that he had his own place. He may have had it for years, for all I know, since one time we were at a furniture store. The employee had made a strange comment to my ex about some furniture that my ex had wanted me to get. And when I questioned him about it, he convinced me that the guy had been joking. This was about a year or two before everything fell apart, and I ended up leaving him. He made it seem like he just found this place right before the scheduled closing date. But when he moved out, he revealed to me that he'd had the place for a while and could have been staying there the whole time during our divorce. He had just wanted to live in the house to stay there and harass me because I dared to leave him. He put me through absolute hell during the divorce, and it made me sick to find out that he could have been staying in his apartment the whole time. He was almost certainly going there during the day while he was cleaning up at work. That was how he had gotten away with cheating for as long as he did. He had a job that allowed him to drive around and see clients, and while he was out, he would duck out and see the women he had been messaging on dating apps, which was what eventually led to the divorce. This was a long time ago, and it took me a while to get past what happened, but I'm in a better place and have been in a long-term relationship for many years now with a good person. My ex remarried almost immediately after our divorce, and I hope for his second wife's sake that he treats her better than he did me. Story 26. I have a tie between two pretty bad betrayals. The first was when my parents claimed me on their taxes after my first year in college, but refused to co-sign on my second-year loans because I was taking an extreme amount of credit hours, which was their wish, and failed a couple of my classes. I had to quit university and ended up living on someone's porch for 2 years, working minimum wage jobs until I could afford to rent my own place. The second time was when my now ex-husband told me he submitted immigration paperwork for me to move to his country, Canada, after I filled out all the forms and paid for the medical exams, etc. He told me he was working on buying a house and that the wait time was at least a year to get a permanent residency. After 2 years, he confessed that he never submitted a huge packet of paperwork to immigration and that it had been sitting on his dresser the whole time. He never gave me an explanation and didn't cooperate when I initiated the divorce, which cost me thousands of dollars in years to finalize. Story 27. I realized as an adult that I'm a victim of extensive gaslighting and abuse by an estranged parent. It started when I called the police on my estranged parent for severely abusing our mom when I was 8. It only hit me years later that he resented us for getting them arrested, and as a result, he soured his relationship with me and my siblings. I think he might have anticipated that we would find out the extent of his abuse of our mother and report him again. So in order to protect himself, he would have us sit down in front of a camcorder at the end of every year for over 10 years and recite to the camera how he was a good father, not a bad man in any way, as if that would overwrite his years of torture. Unfortunately for him, I've known about his abuse since I was 4 years old. Things stopped when I finally confronted him during one of his yearly recordings because the gaslighting was driving me insane and making me question everything, including my reality and his treatment of us. He was punishing us for years for something he did, but we couldn't name his crime, just that we betrayed him. Even as a recording after leaving jail where he tried to
Salutations.
lied about what he did to get him arrested. I realize now he was trying to produce evidence to protect himself from the domestic violence case the state of California would have built against him. And if it went to trial, we would likely be witnesses. He got away with it by coercing my mother to drop the charges by forging her signature on a letter he wrote, pretending to be her, asking the DA not to pursue charges against him. Things really came to a head when we got older. And during one of his yearly tapes, I confronted him about what he'd been doing to us. He made sure none of what I accused him of made it on tape. This was someone who beat me up as a child over lying, and also someone I witnessed verbally threaten and attempt to harm my mom. He even got his siblings to help gaslight my mom about him threatening her, but I backed her up because I saw it. As a child, you don't really have the language to understand why adults do bad things, but I knew that he was a bad person. I would have nightmares about him. Many times when he thought I wasn't looking, I would be watching him treat her badly from around the corner. I heard the things he would say. He used to routinely lock her out of the house on nights when it was raining, and she would have to stay at the neighbor's. Sometimes he would make her sleep on the floor or under a table as punishment, just to assert his control. He would sleep around, contract STDs, and then try to blame my mom for why he was ill. The final straw came in 2020, finally big enough to fight back. He instigated a lot, but I stood my ground. We chased him away. Now we have not spoken to him in years, and my mom is getting a divorce. It's funny that when the going got tough, when it it was time for the principles he applied to other people to be applied to him, suddenly he ran away and was very scared. It's hard to describe the feeling of being gaslit your whole life. I don't know how to explain that the morals and values he taught us were all lies. He never believed a word he said to us and certainly never acted like he did. Even worse, the person teaching you can hate you for your whole life for yourself. Story 20. I was fired by my boss, who was also my mentor and trusted advisor, after he was manipulated by a new senior manager. She concocted this whole conspiracy that I was somehow working a second job because I worked late at night sometimes, and she felt I should be getting more work done. She had zero basis for this assumption. She just didn't like me from day one, and there was not much I could do to change her opinion. Yeah, that one hurt. And the look on my boss's face when he read me my termination like I was some sort of villain completely blindsided me on a Monday morning. I literally just met with him to talk about the new manager. A few weeks before, he told me I was doing great and to give her a chance. It was a complete 180. I hope he regrets it and thinks about it at night. I took them to court, represented myself. They had lawyers and still lost. The conspiracy manager was so flustered when I cross-examined her and caught her in lies and exaggerations. It really helped my self-esteem. I'll never forget that counter counseling. That hearing was the most nerve-wracking time of my life. My heart was beating out of my chest. Story 29. During my senior year of high school, our entire class played an elimination game with a major cash prize for the last person standing. Everyone was assigned their own target, and we had to eliminate them with water guns. People took it very seriously, myself included. My best friend at the time had a car, and I asked to coordinate stakeouts so we could eliminate our targets together. She was very unreliable, constantly asking for bullshit, but never returning any favors. I let it slide and decided I could win it by myself. I focused, planned, and executed all of my attacks until I was one of the last finalists. I even took weeks off work to avoid being eliminated in public. Cut to the final week, and it's my best friend's birthday. She invites me and 10 other girls to dinner at a restaurant in the city. I declined, explaining that I'd love to do something just the two of us after the game is over. She melts down, blames me for being a bad friend, and accuses me of being overdramatic. She insists that I suck it up and go to her party. Long story short, she had sided with the most popular girl in our grade. At the end of her dinner party, in front of everyone, I got shot in the back. My best friend coordinated everything, so this random girl she barely knew could eliminate me. This was 10 years ago, and I still haven't gotten over it. Story 30. Her mother chose a man younger than her oldest son over me and my younger brothers. This decision led to her going to jail, where my siblings and I had to move several states away. I was a teenager at the time, so it felt like my world was flipped upside down. She had also jeopardized our safety, something I found out later. Then when she tried to make amends, I discovered she was still talking to this man. I stopped talking to her at that point. Several years, close to a decade, passed. I made amends and she was repairing our relationship. I offered her a place to live with me and my husband. Bad idea. From the very beginning, she didn't listen, made everything about herself, caused my husband and me to walk on eggshells, and then abandoned her stuff at our house, creating chaos. I spent weeks and months trying to help her and explain why there was trouble. She ignored it all. When I finally called it quits and kicked her out, she didn't arrive on time, nearly 3 hours late. She got angry that all of her stuff was out on the lawn, even though I told her to leave. We found drugs and drug paraphernalia in the house, which was the final vindicating straw for me. Story 31. I know this might sound strange to some people, but I was an incredibly religious kid. I wore cross necklaces to school, t-shirts with Bible verses. My church was small, so we had a combined youth group for 7th, 10th, 12th, and 8th grade. The older kids were so cool, and I couldn't wait to be in middle school and join the youth group. By the time I was ending 7th grade, I was the only middle schooler, but I was like a little sister to a bunch of my high school friends. I'm still close with a few of them. Well, we got a new youth pastor who had a vision for growing our youth group. So he announced that he was splitting the youth group into middle school and high school groups, which left me by myself. I was devastated and confused. My friends and I naturally drifted apart, spending less time together. It was humiliating and awful to be the only kid in a Bible class. Church had been such a fundamental part of my identity, and to start dreading Sundays and Wednesdays left me feeling so lost and despised. I'm not exaggerating when I say I felt betrayed by God. Long story short, I stopped eating, began self-harming, had suicidal thoughts, and all this wrecked the rest of my teenage years. This betrayal began my first depressive episode, which was later diagnosed as bipolar I disorder. I'm much better now, medicated and recently mentally stable. But yeah, many years and much pain started. Story 32. I was engaged to my first wife and could already tell something was up because she changed so much right after we got engaged. As we were going through wedding planning, I got us a chance to rent a condo in a perfect location in a great area. We went to do the walkthrough with the owner. It was way better than anything we had seen. I was ready to put down a deposit and sign. She told the owner we needed a day to think about it. He said sure, but he wouldn't hold it. So if someone else took it, they took it. We got in the car and drove away.
My life
To the next parking lot and parked.
and trying to break me down.
I simply asked her, are we getting married or not? She said she didn't know because her mom was so against it. I knew there was no one else, and her mom was a first-class piece of work. I asked her why. She said her mother didn't think I made enough money and that she could do better. I was 27 at the time and made more than her mom and dad combined. I took the ring back off her finger, even though she tried to prevent me from doing so, and took her home. I told her she had 24 hours to decide. I shouldn't have given her that. She drove to my house 2 hours later, crying so hard.
What are you doing?
Couldn't park her car.
Get out of there.
I shouldn't have, but I did. We called the guy back and took the condo. We got married. Her mom never let up, and we divorced after 1 year.
You know, this is the game.
Still living in the condo on our original
It's the game.
Story 33. This is probably quite light compared to everyone else. But for me, it was my mother not taking my dad's side against my sister.
Yeah, it's a line piece.
There are
Don't
many
mess with
reasons
it.
why I despise my mother. But the two biggest
Just leave it alone.
she treats her children like accessories to brag about, then beg for money from her own mother while spending the child support she gets from her ex-husband on designer bags and fancy meals, and the way she has always treated me. I'm the oldest child of all the kids in my extended family, so I was the firstborn, and she declared upon my birth that I was unattractive and would always be unattractive. My nose is big. That's literally it. She has said this to me my whole life, but also I'm slightly autistic and was quite a weird child, whereas she's quite outgoing and extroverted and likes dressing up, etc. To cut a long story short, I have always preferred to sit in a corner and read a book and avoid conversations, and she's always made fun of me for being weird. When I grew up and got older, I started to advocate for my cousins and began calling her out for her irresponsible behavior, often leaving her children with her mother, who she claims to despise, for weeks at a time while she traveled the world with various boyfriends and money she didn't have, and irresponsible spending, not prioritizing her children. Eventually, she had a big fight with her mother about this, and they stopped talking. I didn't take sides and chose to remain in contact with her family because she's never done anything wrong to me. And to be honest, she had a point. My aunt didn't like this and began insulting me for it. Eventually, I told my parents that I'd like to go no contact with my aunt as much as possible because she used every little thing from the way I walked to the things I bought to belittle me and call me weird and unattractive, etc. My dad said yes, my mom said no. Anyway, a couple of years ago, my parents let my aunt stay with us for a couple of weeks in the summer, and we had to share a small apartment. We were having dinner, and she said something about how her daughters are almost adults, and how she's proud that they're so obedient to her, and how one of them has good grades, etc., while they were literally there in silence. I thought this was really weird because it was singling out the daughter who did not have good grades, and it wasn't fair to her, so I said that. My aunt exploded and began saying that children, I was 23 years old at this time, should be seen and not heard, and that's where my dad raised me back. She never liked me either for the same reasons as me. She claims I'm unattractive because my dad is unattractive, etc. And that modern society is terrible because young people
I
are
ain't been
becoming
here in a long
LGBT
time.
vegetarians. One of her daughters is openly LGBT
Damn.
vegetarian.
Yeah,
I argued back and said that she couldn't say that stuff in front of her daughters, whether it's right or wrong. My dad agreed, and my aunt got even angrier and started screaming that I'm a horrible child, etc. I told her daughters to leave the room and go to their rooms. After they left, I told my aunt that if she wanted to end up alone, and with her daughters not talking to her ever again, she was well on her way to achieving what she wanted. This was a little mean, but it's the truth, since my cousins have repeatedly told me their plans to leave and never come back as soon as they came. This culminated in the biggest argument
by Big G Farewell.
My father and I have never forgiven our things. Our family is still together. My mother always says she loves me and loves my dad. But after seeing the way she let her sister abuse her daughters and then abuse us, it hasn't been the same. We both notice how submissive she is to her sister, twins, and her sister is incredibly manipulative toward her. But we can't make her see just how bad she is.
Shit.
What's the most ridiculous reason for which you've been dumped? Story 1. I was 15. He was 22. It was a primarily online relationship, but we didn't live far from each other and we planned to meet. I genuinely thought I loved him for a time, but our conversations were either horny or him saying sad stuff about himself and me reassuring him all the time. It was emotionally exhausting, and I was already suffering with my own depression from before meeting him. Then I found out a boy my own age, who went to my school, who I had a crush on for literally years, might like me, and I started talking to him. I didn't even have confirmation that he liked me. It was literally just my friends saying they catch him looking at me sometimes. We were purely friendly at this point, but talking to him was always pleasant and fun and made me feel good. When I realized that my heart sank every time I saw my boyfriend was online, meaning I'd have to talk to him and listen to him call himself names and shit, I knew I had to end it. But beyond that, I didn't want to cheat on him and start building something new with this other dude while still being with him. So I told him, and I was honest, and said that I wanted to take a chance with this other guy my own age. I don't really feel bad about it either. What else could I have done? Stay in a depressing, emotionally draining relationship? Stay with him but cheat so I could feel happy sometimes? No, I was 15, 12 years later, and I'm married to the guy I left him for. Story 2. I was dating a guy whose parents didn't like me. It was a long-distance relationship, so we mostly chatted online, but also made occasional phone calls. So we were talking on the phone, and at one point I no way I'll see that goose. No way. Of course she wanted to eat on the patio, of course. I hadn't even sat down outside, but Captain Asshole Goose is standing on the railing of the pond side. I think she was just sitting down when I walked over to the goose. I think I said something like, "Not today, goose," as he flew from the railing towards my face. I sidestepped and kicked the goose straight on in the chest with my shin, sending him back over the railing. It was so satisfying. The goose squawked and swam back and forth, protesting what had just happened. I'm pretty sure I yelled, "That's what you get, MF." I turn around and I see the look of disgust on my new girl's face. I realized then that it looked like I just walked outside and kicked the shit out of a harmless goose. She picked up her food and left. I went after her, trying to explain why I just kicked a goose. She wouldn't hear any of it. I went back to salvage my meal. Guess who was standing on my sweet and sour chicken, eating his cousins? The fucking goose, that's who. I wanted to kill that fucking goose, but I just left it all. On the way out, I bumped into a guy that works here. He says, "Hey, you can't leave your food out there, or those asshole geese will eat it." "Yeah," I said. Later, she broke up with me on the phone. I asked if it was because I kicked a fucking goose, and she said, yeah, she had never seen someone so cruel. I was in college. Losing 3 lunches is like getting your laptop stolen. Story 14. My ex, who I dated for 3.5 years, dumped me because she believed that every couple should have a 90-day no-contact period. The girl initiates it by ghosting and gets to date around and had told me that she would reach out if and when she was ready to come back. When I asked her how she would try to come back, she said that her friend used the "I'm ready to give you back your stuff" tactic. Apparently her best friend did that with her husband, who BTW have a very unhealthy dynamic, and she told me a few months about this plan before she ghosted me and enacted this great plan. I remember asking her what would happen if I reached out during this ghosting period, and her response was, "I know it's not fair, but I would reset the clock to 0 days." I might add that this girl is a therapist, was in her middle 20s at the time, and gives others professional advice. She broke up with me over the phone on speaker in her friend's car. Yep, that same friend who also did this tactic. And then told me she would reach out later because she still loves me. Safe to say she had another boy of the same ethnicity as me lined up a few days later. She was refusing to answer my friend's ride when asked to give my stuff back.
Alrighty, we finna fight this dragon, huh? Ooh, shit.
Wasn't that close to me. Had to let me in, give me the stuff. The last time I saw this girl, I was in a relationship with her. And I'm happy to say it was for the best. I've been with my current GM for almost 3 years now. And if it wasn't for my ex's BS plan, I wouldn't be with the girl
It's about the way that looks. Ooh, shit, okay.
I got to see how great my friends are at times. The funniest thing to come out of this whole thing is that whenever my friends and I are debating or arguing about
I ain't we're being invaded, bro. Come on.
90 days, bro. Or joke about how they will replace me with a discount bottle. Referring to my ex dating the discount version 3 days after we broke up. Story 15. Got back to nursing school from Fort Benning. Was working hard, studying, learning, and doing my best. Had a girl start harassing and stalking me because I turned down her offer to hook up with her. Told her I had a GF and planned on marrying her this May. Girl proceeds to steal my cell phone out of my dorm room whenever I was at clinic. Proceeds to text her phone with my phone, making it seem like I had been talking to her for months. Had no idea this even happened. February 14th comes around, and that stalker starts sending screenshots to the GF. It was my number for my phone,
Excuse me, Tinky.
but I never even think that
Come on.
Naturally, GF dumps me thinking I cheated. The stalker girl then starts hounding me through Snapchat and Instagram,
God
asking
damn
me
it,
to
bro.
run out of that. I block her over and over, but she makes new accounts on both platforms. Eventually, she spills the beans through Snapchat that she orchestrated the entire thing from the get-go as payback for me scoring her advances. I show my ex-GF the evidence as I maintained my innocence the whole time. She states, "I don't really care anymore. I was going to leave you and move to Florida in April anyways." On the plus side, I'll be a new BSN in less than a month. Story 16. A girl once broke up with me because her cousin thought I was ugly. Bit of backstory. I'd just been on a date with this girl. Our first date
Ooh, shit like this. Fuck.
Personally, I thought it went well. We had fun hanging out and both enjoyed it, even though it wasn't something I would usually watch. We even started talking about what we could do for our next date as we were leaving the city. The trouble began soon after I got home. I received a message on Facebook from my then girlfriend's cousin asking how the date went. I replied that I thought it went well and that we had funding. And then she dropped the bombshell. She thought I was ugly and that my girlfriend could do better. She went on about how I would never have a relationship as perfect as hers and her boyfriend's. She started pushing my girlfriend to break up with me. At first, my girlfriend said she wasn't going to because of how well our first date went. But her cousin kept pushing more and more. And eventually, my girlfriend came, saying that we were breaking up because family was more important. Normally, I would agree with that sentiment. But in this case, family was a cousin who thought my girlfriend shouldn't date me because I didn't meet her standards. Bear in mind, I hadn't even met any of her family yet. I just hope her cousin doesn't interfere with any more of her relationships because my girlfriend was
What the fuck did it hit?
She probably still is, although I wouldn't know because I blocked her and her cousin and haven't spoken to them since. Story 17. I wouldn't say I got dumped, but on the way home from my second date with a girl, a deer ran in front of me on the road, and I crashed my car into a ditch. I texted her. What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in? Story 1. I served for a couple of years and worked in multiple restaurants during that time frame. I worked at a Denny's on the night shift, which was the best and worst job for many reasons. Anyway, there was a regular who came in often, as drunk as could be and very rude. He tipped really well, but was extremely disrespectful to us girls. It never fazed me, so I served him often. He offered many times to pay for extra service and tried to get me to leave with him frequently. Of course, I never did, but a couple of months later I was working at a new place, a little more high-end. I worked mornings here, and this was a Sunday morning church rush. Guess who was seated in my section? My rude regular from my last job with his entire family. His wife, kids, parents, the whole group, fresh out of church. The look on this man's face when I walked up and said hello was priceless. He was red as a fire truck, and I made it worse by asking if he remembered me. He left me a huge tip, probably because I didn't mention his rude behavior from his late drunken nights. Story 2. When I was in second grade, my brother and I would always be picked up after school by my dad. We had a green van with a red stripe on the side. So my brother grabs my hand and storms us up to the car. He rips open the door, sits us down, buckles me in, and then says, "Can we get McDonald's on the way home?" We both look up, and there are two middle-aged adults sitting in the front seat who are obviously not our family. They stare at us. We stare at them. In my little brain, we had been staring at each other for at least 10 minutes at this point. My brother unbuckles me, unbuckles himself, we get out and walk away. No words were exchanged. We then checked who was in the car before getting in from that point forward. Story 3. This poor girl walked into my lecture by mistake about halfway through. This particular professor really enjoys talking to all of his students and was super engaging even with 400 plus students in his class. When the girl walked in, my professor stopped teaching, looked at the girl, and asked if she was in the class. She said she was, and began walking towards the front where the open seats were. This is a fairly large lecture hall, and all 200 students, approximately how many actually show up to class, were now forced to watch this poor girl walk towards a seat because the professor didn't continue talking and just stared at her. She got close to the front, and I think the pressure of the whole room got to her. She said, "Actually, no, I'm not," turned around, and we all had to watch this poor girl climb back up the stairs and out of the hall. I was literally watching my worst nightmare. Story 4. I was interviewing for a big promotion at my old job. I had put in the time, the hours, and the effort for this promotion, and I had been passed up a few times, so I was sending out resumes while trying to get this promotion. I went through the first interview, and everything seemed great. They invited me for the second interview. I was so excited. Flash forward 2 days, and I go in for the interview. The interview is with the regional and site managers. Everything is going great. They are asking me, what are your priorities, goals, etc. At the end, the site manager changes his posture and says, "Would you say that you're a loyal employee? Nessa Betsa 34. Taken aback, I say, "Of course, I've been here almost 2 years, etc. And like a predator circling its prey, this person turns the computer monitor around and shows me my private Facebook post that I had posted saying I was in the market for a job in the same field. Now, there's no way he could have seen this, as it was a friends-only post. Someone I work with must have told him about it. He then proceeds to read them to me out loud. Not only the posts about my job search, but also personal posts about my health situation, and questions that I didn't bring up to anybody other than personal friends. I look at the regional manager.
and this person won't look me in the eyes. He is shifting, obviously uncomfortable. I tried to say that I was looking just in case this promotion didn't work out, as I am a college student paying my way through school. But he kept interrupting me and saying, "Loyalty is key." He then tells me, "We will think about it," and points toward the door. The regional manager kind of coughs and goes to shake my hand, but by that point I was already out the door. So I said, "Thanks anyway," and then proceeded to have the most uncomfortable walk back to my desk. I was wearing heels for the first time in like a year, so I stumbled on my way out the door, with coworkers asking for the details if I got the promotion. Not as uncomfortable as some of you, but this one was definitely a top for me. Story 5. I was in a business college class, and the professor was talking about something related to how celebrities brand themselves. Someone in the class brought up Shaun White as someone who had great celebrity branding, but isn't really talked about a lot. The professor was from India and said he wasn't familiar with who that was. So my clever self thought it would be perfect to say out loud, "I'm talking about Mountain Dew, baby," as a joke reference to that newscast where Shaun White said he had been drinking all night but was underage, and the news person asked him what he meant. So he responded with, "I'm talking about Mountain Dew, baby." Well, no one seemed to know about that, or at least didn't think it was funny, as silence rang through the classroom, and the professor awkwardly moved on to a new topic. Truly the most awkward situation I've been in, and also the most haunting moment of my life. Story 6. I have a regular breakfast place that I had been frequenting on the weekends for about a good 5-6 years. One day I went into work later because of a doctor's appointment, so I decided to pick up some breakfast at my regular place. I walk in, take a look around to find a spot to sit at, and I see my dad. He's sitting in a corner spot with a woman I don't recognize. He looked shocked, and I decided to walk over. He stands up and gives me a hug and introduces her as a coworker. It was the most awkward introduction of my life. My dad was an AC repairman and was strictly on the road. No women in his office. I pretended like I believed him, said hello, and sat down on my own. Definitely one of the most awkward moments of my life that will stand out for a long time. More background. My mom and dad haven't been together since.
You sure about that?
However, he was married to another woman when this took place. The waitresses were all my friends, and a couple of days later, when I went for breakfast, they proceeded to tell me how he met that lady there every week. I never brought it up to him and pretended it never happened. That was about 14 years ago. I still go to that breakfast place, and the girls told me after that day he never came back to that restaurant. In a couple of weeks, it will be 1 year since he passed. I'm glad I got this opportunity to think and talk about him. Story 7. When I went on my first solo date back in high school, I had a huge crush on this girl, thought she was really cool, and I loved her art, and I couldn't believe she said yes. We went to the zoo because it was free, and we were just broke teenagers, and we had a blast. We went to grab some food at this place before having to split off to go home. Our trains were heading in opposite directions, and the entrances were across the street from each other. So I walked with her to her side to say goodbye. I closed my eyes and awkwardly leaned in to give her a kiss goodbye, and she went in more for a hug. I ended up accidentally bumping her in the face, and her nose started bleeding. I was so embarrassed and didn't know what to say, so I just asked, "Are you okay?" She replied, "I think so." Still not knowing what to do, I just said, "Okay, bye," and then ran across the street to catch my train. Story 8. I was once traveling through Europe with a group of around 10 people. We stopped in Paris one night and went out. We had a lovely dinner, and then everyone stayed around for drinks afterward. There was an old man who was sitting alone at the table next to us. One of my friends asked him if he wanted to sit with us, and he seemed quite happy about that. A few hours on, the man had told this whole story about how his wife had passed away last year. She was the love of his life, and they had planned to go traveling together. But her illness took her before they could go, and he was now traveling around because it was one of the last things she had said to him. He goes around to all the places that they had said they would visit together, and he buys postcards to bring home and put in a special area with photos of his wife back home. Now this guy was pretty much speaking uninterrupted. We were just listening to this beautiful story. Everyone was a little bit emotional, but out of nowhere, after he had finished his story, told us all about his wife, shed a few tears. One of my friends, who had a bit too much to drink after a moment of silence, goes, "So, what's a good-looking man like yourself doing all on your own?" The old guy kind of looks at us and says, "Well, if I could be with my wife, I would be." My friend replies with, "Ah, come on, you gotta get out there, you know? You should go talk to her," pointing at a waitress. We were horrified and were just like, "No, stop talking," because he had somehow completely blanked out this whole conversation with this guy. I got up and started to get him up to take him back to where we were staying, and he, while moving, was just like, "You only live once," and kept saying things like that while we walked away. The next day, he was mortified and had no idea of the encounter and didn't even remember meeting the guy. Story 9. When I was in elementary school, I hated using the public bathroom and would always use the nurse's bathroom instead. She was nice and understood this. However, one day I needed the bathroom and she was not around, so I let myself in. Shortly afterward, the nurse came back with a student and began feeding him with a stomach tube. I was horrified. I realized that this was a closely guarded secret and decided to go to the bathroom hoping to sneak out later. Shortly after it ended, more and more students with secret medical needs kept coming, and the situation kept getting more complicated. Finally, after an hour and a half in the bathroom, I walked out. The nurse gave me a horrific glare, and the student looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. When I got back to class, the teacher yelled at me in front of everyone for being gone so long, and I panicked/lied by yelling at the top of my lungs. I had a stomach issue. All the kids in class laughed at me, and the part that sucked was that I now knew most of their embarrassing secrets. Story 10. When I was around 10 years old, I was sleeping over at my best friend Juan's house. We usually stayed up really late playing and would sleep in until like 11 or 12, which I loved because I rarely got to do that at my house. At about 8 a.m., his dad comes into the room and tells me to get dressed because he needed my help. His dad was a big drinker, so either his breath reeked of beer from last night, or he had one for breakfast. Either way, he was a bit buzzed. He tells me he needs my help picking out a toy for Juan as a surprise, and we were going to drive to Walmart. So we get in the car and drive down to the Walmart, which was like 10 minutes away from his house. It was a pretty awkward ride, and he starts asking me questions to make small talk, like how I was liking school and if I had a girlfriend yet. We get to Walmart, and he takes me to the toy section and asks me what toy I think Juan would like. I walk around and see Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. Juan and I were huge Star Wars fans, and even went to see Empire Strikes Back in theaters when it was re-released, so I knew he would like it. He buys the toy, and then we have another awkward car ride back. He thanks me for helping and asks me to keep it a secret. I changed into my pajamas again and tried to go back to sleep. But about 10 minutes later, his dad comes in and surprises him with the toy and gives me a wink. I found out a few years later that the reason he had me go on this mission to get the toy was because he had been really drunk a couple of nights ago and hit Juan, and he wanted to make it up to him. As far as I know, that was the only time that ever happened. But I don't really know since we lost touch after 8th grade. It was just such a strange and awkward morning. Story 11. I worked on a deli counter, and that meant having to give customers free samples when they wanted to try a product. Let me first say I can be very socially awkward sometimes, and I am not a very confident person. I was about 22 years old at the time. Female, by the way. A guy in his late 40s/early 50s comes to the counter and wants to try some olives. I go to the cupboard behind the counter and get a small plastic shot glass and a cocktail stick and put some olives in, and go to offer the guy the glass. He holds up both arms and shows his hands are full of bags. He then proceeds to open his mouth, indicating he wanted me to feed him the olive. I was kind of shocked and didn't really know what to do. I wanted to avoid conflict with the customer and have him go away, so I just used a cocktail stick to get an olive and held it out towards him. He then ate the olive off the stick but let his mouth close around my fingers. It was honestly one of the most disgusting things that have ever happened to me. And for ages after I could still feel the wetness of his mouth on my fingers. I must have scrubbed my hands a million times. Story 12. I was 19, female, and moving for college out of my local town. A few months before, I had watched football with a guy friend of mine, and to make it more entertaining, we would switch to something more adult during commercials. This was well before smartphones and easily accessible content, and I asked to borrow a few after the game as I enjoyed watching. Months later, I'm moving, and my family, super conservative Christians, is there helping me pack up. I had put the DVDs in a box in the back of my closet and never watched them or thought of them after that. My dad was in my room supposed to be helping with the heavy stuff, and I hear my name yelled loudly. Dad. Abby. Not real name. Me. Yeah, what do you need? Dad. What is this? Holding box with adult-themed DVD clearly showing. Me. Silence, dying inside, vision tunneling. Death. No father should have to catch their daughter with this kind of material, holding up another DVD. Me. Immediately grabbed said box and threw it in the dumpster. I don't remember the rest of the day packing. Story 13. So I was a freshman in high school. I forget what the situation was, but basically I had the house to myself in the morning before school. I had also recently discovered some adult content that was on demand through our cable. Well, one morning I decide I'm going to enjoy some of that content before school. I put it on, do my business, and I'm done. Time to get ready for school. Put on clothes. And remember from previous times that sometimes after I finish, some stuff leaks out a bit here and there for a couple of minutes afterward. I don't want any to get on my boxers for school. No problem, just pop a rag in my boxers as some sort of catcher, right? Genius, obviously. Rest of the morning goes smooth, catch the bus, and on my way to school. Get to school, get my stuff from my locker, and head to class. Walking to class, and what do I feel? The rag. It's now on its way out of the bottom of my shorts. I don't want to pull it out, that would be too obvious. So I just walk a little faster. I feel it fall out the bottom of my shorts. Extremely embarrassed. I don't even look behind me or around me to see if anyone noticed. Just keep my head down and keep walking. Pretty sure my face was super red when I made it to class. I was a super shy, awkward kid with few friends as it was. No one ever said anything or made fun of me for it. So maybe I got lucky. Either way, the most embarrassing situation I've ever been in. Story 14. I was in a reserve infantry battalion in the UK, TA. Each year we had to do a 2-week training session. One year we did it at a regular army barracks not far from where my grandparents lived. On the middle Sunday, we were allowed the evening off and headed into the local town for some entertainment. My friends and I ended up quite drunk looking for something to eat. We found the only place open, a nice-looking restaurant. We were very loud and very obnoxious, especially to the female servers. We were lucky not to get kicked out. The very next weekend after was my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. It was apparently being held at a swanky restaurant. You know where this is going, right? I rode up with my parents and brothers, and I quickly realized the streets were disturbingly familiar. We pulled into the parking lot, and I knew exactly where we were. At least 2 of the servers had been working the night I was there, having had too much to drink. Lots of giggling and pointing. My dad says, "I think she likes you." Story 15. When I was 26, I was dating a 40-year-old woman. It was a pretty serious thing. I met her, asked her out, got turned down because of the age difference. I spent some time and effort wooing her, and eventually got a date. We hit it off and ended up setting some sort of record for awkwardness on the traditional 3rd date. However, there was a 4th date and more, and we soon found that we were very compatible. She enjoyed my muscles and energy, and I enjoyed her intelligence and wit. We had a Friday night date, and I stayed over at her place. She was a golfer and had set an alarm because she had an early tea time on Saturday. We woke up, took turns in the bathroom, and then started playing around. She complained that she was sore from the night before, and so I jokingly suggested an alternative, something that we had never done or even talked about. To my surprise, she agreed. We ended up in a particular chair in her living room, which she liked because it was just the right size for her to spread herself and rest her legs on the arms. So I'm sitting in this silly chair. She's sitting on me. I have the element made a passing comment to me and my brother like, "This is pretty interesting." And my brother responded with something benign like, "For sure." Wow. Never in my life would I expect to see a single polite response to a stranger's passing comment launch such a reaction. But let me tell you, it did. It was a pretty low-key place, so every head turned when my sister-in-law came charging at my brother in the middle of the place, unleashing a barrage of words that I could barely comprehend. "Why don't you go talk to that girl?" "Who is she? Girlfriend of yours?" "What's her name?" "Huh? What's that girl's name?" Etc., laced with way more emotion and intensity. Now afterward, it seemed clear that there were some deeper issues there. Clearly some trust issues, maybe some past problems. Who knows? What I do know is this. 2 hours. They argued in the middle of this place for 2 hours. They were our ride home. This was before Uber, in a small town without taxis. We were an hour away from where we lived, and there was no one to call to come get us. It was the middle of the night. It wasn't until the establishment finally called the cops and the police came and told her that she had to leave, that we finally left, and rode home, in silence. left very promptly. Story 18. Whenever an issue crops up in popular culture, I frequently find myself having conversations out loud with myself about it. I almost rehearse my opinion on it, and then think about what makes sense, or what does not make sense to say. I'll often use rhetoric and exaggeration again out loud whenever I'm doing this. I was in my garage cleaning it out, and recently there was news about a domestic incident. I found a lot of the reactions defending the accused person beyond ridiculous and completely without merit, both logically and morally. I was getting myself all wound up, arguing with myself about the stance that these people had taken in wanting to defend this unpleasant individual. So there I am in the garage, pantomiming the crazy things and arguments in defense of the accused person I had read online. I'm saying things like, oh, and then you have to do something. And if that doesn't stop them, that's when you do something else. I'm saying this at full volume to myself, basically having an argument with myself. If anyone saw me, they would think that I am completely crazy. Wouldn't you know it, my next-door neighbor is standing there watching me say these completely insane things. Whenever I finally noticed her, she quickly turned on her heel and walked away. I rarely see her, so it took several days before I came across her again and was able to apologize and try to explain the situation. I don't think she bought anything that I said or really cared about the words I had to share. She just wanted me to stop talking and go away. Story 19. I work for a cable internet service, and I had an installation at an apartment that is known for temporary housing, where the apartment is completely furnished, and they give us the key to go in and do the install. When all done, I stop back to the office and return the key. Well, I was given the wrong key and ended up in the wrong apartment. I unlocked the door and entered. As I'm looking around, I'm thinking, okay, they must have already moved in. There are open soda cans, beer cans, pizza boxes, etc. I get to the entertainment center and already see equipment installed. I check my work order, and as I realize I'm in the wrong apartment, I hear the door starting to unlock, and a young lady enters. Before she had the door open, I announced, I'm from the cable company. And she's like, what the heck? How did you get in? I think I was more fearful than she was. As I'm explaining I got the key from the office, my voice is shaky. I'm shaky, and she's more upset that the office gave me the wrong key. I apologized and gave her my supervisor's number and called him to explain. She stated she wasn't going to call him, but ended up doing so. Now, anytime I have an installation at those apartments, I also have a leasing agent with me during the duration. Story 20. As a young, naive kid around the age of 10, I was heavily bullied at school. So whatever people told me to do, I just did it out of fear of receiving punches. A kid said I was too scared to type in the Google search bar embarrassing